For all those who appreciate the work that we're doing here on Standing for Truth, please hit that subscribe button because we are just getting started.
Okay, it looks like we are live. We've got a great show for everybody tonight. I'm definitely pumped for this one. I've been looking forward to it, and I know the audience is excited as well. I want to thank both Dr. Ken Hovind and Derrick Barnes for giving us their time tonight for this very important debate. Without their generosity, we would not be able to put on such great debate so frequently. So thank you so much, gentlemen. And of course, tonight we are debating, is evolution science? One of our favorite topics. So before we get started, though, as always, what I like to do is give both debaters an opportunity for a brief introduction as to who they are, what they may be doing, and anything they would like to say about themselves in the form of an intro. So therefore, whoever would like to get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? And also, once again, thank you for doing this.
Thank you. I'm gonna start it off. So my name is Derrick, master's student going for a degree in science education. So I'm very interested in the topic of evolution in general, especially as it relates to evolution juxtaposed with creationism in general. I'm just happy to be here. I just want to thank you guys. Dr. Ken Hovind, thank you, sir, for agreeing to come and discuss this issue with me. Definitely appreciate that. And I'm going to, for the people that's out there, I'm going to try to put some more content together. As you can see, I'm putting some content together, and I'm going to have a YouTube channel up. But just give me a little minute. Let me accumulate a little more. My studies is up and running right now, so I just got to find the time. But yeah.
Awesome. I know the work never ends. So Derrick, thanks so much. We'll definitely check into your YouTube channel. So Dr. Hovind, thank you so much for being with us again tonight. If you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for having me. My name's Ken Hovind. I taught high school science and math for 15 years. I was raised in a family of educators and engineers and always been curious about science. And I just want to know the truth. I don't care who's got it. I want the truth. And I think the truth is, it's real obvious. Somebody designed this world and the animals and plants stay the same kind. There is no evolution happening at all anywhere. It never has been. Evolution is a religion that people believe happened long ago and far away, but it's not part of science. I love science, and I think evolution is a great pollution in the science field and ought to be eradicated. Okay?
Awesome. Well, thank you so much to the both of you. This is going to be awesome. We got a good chat tonight. I'll say to the chat, we will have a short Q&A following the discussion. Therefore, make sure you're tagging me. I'll do my best to look at the chat and save your questions, and we'll answer as many as we can. So that being said, we're going to jump right into the opening statements. We're going to have 10-minute openings followed by 5-minute rebuttals, and then an equally timed, respectful, and cordial discussion. One topic at a time, of course. It's going to be a lot of fun. And then we'll end it with, of course, a Q&A. So, Derrick, since you're in the affirmative, I guess we will start with you. And therefore, whenever you're ready, Derrick, I'll put 10 minutes on the timer. And I'll give you a 1-minute warning when you reach the 9-minute mark, just for you to start winding down. So go ahead. The floor is yours.
All right. So the question is evolution science? Now, the question itself is kind of poorly posed in general, because evolution is something that happens. It's a fact. And science just studies natural phenomena. That's what science is. That's what it does. It does it in a systematized way, generally using, always using scientific methods. There's various scientific methods, but in general, that's what typifies what science is. So it's a systematized study of natural phenomena. All right. We know that change occurs. I mean, evolution is just a word that means change. That's all it is. And even if even if we're talking about, on the other side, like creationists, they believe, and Dr. Hovind could correct me if I'm wrong, that some form of evolution does take place. Even they label it microevolution. That's not a recognized term in the sciences, but they at least admit to microevolution. So evolution is just a recognition of change occurring. All right. Now, in the biological sciences, around 99.9% of all sciences accept natural evolution, and that explains the biodiversity of life forms on Earth. All right. 97% of all scientists in general, about 99.9% of biologists. Now, there was a study, or rather a petition that was signed, and it was put out by the Discovery Institute. And it asked how many scientists consider themselves creationists. And it was about 700 people that responded, hey, we're creationists and we're scientists. And that may seem like a large number, but I have it in my notes here. The National Center for Science Education, they went and did a different petition, and they called it Project Steve. And what Project Steve was, and you guys could look it up online, what Project Steve was it only asked for scientists whose names were Steve or some variant of Steve to answer whether or not they accept evolution by way of natural selection. And evolution in general, there's various evolutionary theories. So your natural selection is one, and so on and so forth. But natural evolutionary process, there was over 1,370 scientists just named Steve that accepted a natural explanation for the biodiversity of life on the planet. So clearly the consensus is in 99.9% of all biologists, 97% of all scientists accept evolution as a part of science, right? What I would imagine we will hear from the other side, some controversial issues in science saying, hey, they didn't get this right, or we got this wrong, or something along those lines. That's not an argument. Well, it's an argument, but it's not, it would be called the argument from ignorance. And so that's a fallacy. That's not even like a real argument. So I imagine we'll have that. We'll hear something along the lines of gods or the gaps or something like that. I'd imagine I'll point it out if I hear it, and you could be the judge if that's what took place. But that's what I imagine is going to come from the other side, respectfully. I understand when there's things that you want to believe in, you'll try to rationalize that, but the evidence is in, the consensus is overwhelmingly in favor for evolution by way of some natural process, and natural selection being the predominant theory. But of course, natural selection works in conjunction with other evolutionary processes like punctuated equilibrium, genetic drift, so on and so forth. So that's in. The alternative to evolution is usually placed as like a black and white. You got either creationism or evolution. And I don't even, like I said, evolution is just a word that means change. It's an observed fact. And we can talk about all of the various species that we actually witness changing. You could just look at dogs. They change through another process of evolution. That's artificial selection. So clearly the mechanisms are in place for animals to change over time, right? And in general, creationists just have not an issue with that minor change, but rather with speciation and the idea that we all came from a common ancestor, a significant amount of time back. All that is just the continuous process of evolution taking place, and we can get into what the evolutionary narrative is, and it makes absolute sense. Even if we don't have all of the details right, and I'm pretty sure that Dr. Hovind is going to point out instances where scientists said something and it was wrong. That's fine. In all of these instances, is going to be some other scientists who demonstrated that what that person said was wrong, and that other scientist still accepts evolution. So those wouldn't be successful arguments either. All right. Fundamentally, when it comes to the question of what is the alternative to evolution, especially if you're talking about a physical process, because that's what science does. It limits itself to physical phenomenon. So evolution fits into that category because it's a natural physical explanation for the biodiversity of life. Alternative models, such as creationist models or intelligent design models, do not necessarily. Now, intelligent design, if they pose some type of alien was the creator, that may fit a physicalist model, and it would fall under the purview of science. Unfortunately, for that alien to be there, they would have to get hit through a process of evolution. Unless you posit some type of supernatural explanation, in which case it's not science anymore. So the other alternative, of course, is God. And I have no problem with God. I wish there was a actual physical God that took place. That would be great. But from the definition of what God is, he seems to be an immaterial being. And we have examples of immaterial beings, such as concepts and numbers and stuff like that, and they are incapable of interacting with the physical world. They cannot. We have no example that we know of any immaterial anything actually interacting with the physical world. So if God is that immaterial being that supposedly created everything, it would be impossible for him to do it. So the idea of creationism, if that's the alternative, it's an impossibility if God is defined as that which is immaterial. Now, if it is claimed that he has some type of physical effect in the world, then the evidence of his effect in the world should be able to be demonstrated. I've never seen any good argument where we can justify scientifically that an immaterial being interacted in the world. We have no evidence of this. One other thing that I would like you guys to keep an eye out for before I close out, because I didn't need the full 10 minutes, but one other thing that I want you guys to keep an eye out for is it's called, the fallacy of poisoning the well. So if you label something a creation, then you automatically assume that it requires a creator. But that's just poisoning the well. You have to demonstrate that, and that's what you have to do. You have to demonstrate that what you're labeling a creation was created. If you can't do that, then calling it a creation is a fallacy of linguistics. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, Derrick, thank you so much for that opening statement. That was 8 minutes. The other 2 minutes, we can just throw right into the discussion portion. And it looks like from the chat, we've already got some good questions coming in. Just make sure you are tagging me, therefore I won't miss your question. Dr. Hovind, then you have 10 minutes. You are muted, Dr. Hovind, so just make sure that you unmute yourself before you talk. And whenever you're ready, I'll set the timer for 10 minutes.
There we go. Okay. There we go. All right. According to evolution, things get better automatically. We don't get it to work around here very much. Thank you. Appreciate that. And Derrick, I understand where you're coming from exactly. I was in the same shoes for a long time, and we'll get you converted tonight. Hope you don't lose your job when you do that. But yes, thank you for joining us. The word science, the title of the debate is Evolution Science. Well, we need to define these terms. What are we talking about? Science comes from the Latin word "scire," which means to know. What do we know? We know dogs produce dogs. We do not know dogs and mosquitoes have a common ancestor. You can think that, you can wish that, you can hope that, you can imagine that, but it's really not observable, testable science. Science, systemized knowledge derived from observation, study, etc., the Webster's Dictionary. You get similar definitions no matter where you look. Most Americans believe, the majority have always believed, that God created the world in the last 10,000 years. I believe it's probably in the last 6,000 years. There is a small percentage that believes there's no God involved and it happened pure evolution. But your argument, Derrick, from majority opinion fails obviously in any court of law. It doesn't matter what most people believe. What is truth? But here's some of the test articles. I don't know where you got your information, but Huffington Post said more than 4 in 10 Americans believe in creationism. God made man in the last 10,000 years. Now, you're going to argue this is not the scientists, those who've been brainwashed. I mean, those who've been trained to study science. Okay. The percentage of Americans who believe God created humans 10,000 years ago has only decreased by 2 percentage points in 32 years. Figures rose from 9 to 19 for people who don't believe God had anything to do with evolution at all. So I think the evolution view is clearly in the minority. The rise from 9 to 19% is deceitful, Huffington Post said. The way the question was worded makes the number invalid. A question like, do you think God had anything to do with evolution, will make an atheist say no, since they don't believe in God, and make a believer say no, because they don't believe in evolution. So you got to watch how you word these questions. 1994 survey showed 46% of adults in the United States do not think humans had evolved from earlier species. They said this is startling because it's been a settled issue. Evolution's been a settled issue in science for 150 years. This is from a textbook. I'm surrounded by my library, which is loaded with science textbooks. I taught high school science for years. Washington Times, back at 20 years ago, said 55% of U.S. natural scientists believe in Darwinian evolution. You got to be careful what you mean by that word, evolution. Darwinian evolution? Science has a long history of teaching things that are wrong. I love science, but you have to be cautious. They used to teach the planets go around the Earth. the geocentric theory. They used to teach bigger rocks fall faster than lighter rocks. Galileo proved that wrong. They used to teach if you're sick, you have bad blood, take your blood out, you'll get better. That's how George Washington was killed by his own doctors. And that doctrine of humors that killed George Washington is exactly why the barber pole has the red stripe around it. That's where you'd go to get your blood let out. And the Bible had said the life of the flesh is in the blood that was laying there next to George Washington while they bled him to death. So this textbook says life too has evolved on earth. What does this word mean? Now, Derrick, here's why I think we're going to disagree strongly. I think you need to define the word a little more clearly, okay? Now, someone says, I love you. Well, there's lots of different kinds of love. I love hamburger. I love my wife. I love my country. I love pizza. One of the meanings of the word, many meanings of the word, is cosmic evolution. You have to, at some point, have an origin explain how did we get time, space, and matter. Their answer, their supposed pseudo answer, is the Big Bang. Cosmic evolution, why it matters. You can Google it. There's plenty of stuff on the internet about that. What is cosmic evolution? From Big Bang to humankind. What is the theory of cosmic evolution? Simply defined, cosmic evolution is the study of change, the vast number of development, generational changes that have accumulated during all time, across all space, from Big Bang to humankind. Hydrogen in a light, odorless gas, which given enough time, changes into people. You're welcome to believe that. That's not science, okay? Secondly, we'd have to have what's called chemical evolution. If the Big Bang produced hydrogen and maybe some helium or lithium, somehow you got to get all the elements from hydrogen and helium or lithium. There has to be chemical evolution. This has never been observed. A formation of complex molecules. You have to somehow go, it's all over the internet, but you can Google chemical evolution, theory of life's origin. We have 92 naturally occurring elements plus the synthetic ones. How do you get from hydrogen to uranium, lead, and gold, silver, platinum? They've tried to fuse these elements. You can't get past iron. There's a real problem at iron. But even then, the energy input to change hydrogen gas into anything other than hydrogen gas, yet where's this energy coming from? So I think chemical evolution is not science. It's not been observed, okay? It's a religious theory some people have. Thirdly, you'd have to have stars evolve. Nobody's ever seen a star form. But stellar evolution is a vital part. So when we debating this topic tonight, is evolution science? I want to make sure we're clearly talking about the same thing. Stellar evolution. Star changes over the course of time. Nobody has ever seen a star form. Never. We see a lot of them blow up. That's the opposite of evolution. Silent embarrassment of modern astrophysics. We don't know how a single one of these stars managed to form. Why do stars evolve? Michigan University. Star evolution. This is a vital discussion of the topic. What exactly do you mean by evolution? They talk about the life cycle of a star. This is not observed. It's only observed to go downhill, to explode. It's never observed to go uphill and create a new one. Typical star exists for billions of years. The life cycle of a star. Okay. The origin of stars, the origin of the stars is an unsolved problem for contemporary astrophysics. Now, this was 30 years ago. It's still an unsolved problem. What causes stellar evolution? Nothing. It doesn't happen. Okay. Stars are formed in giant clouds of dust and gas. Whoever wrote this, nasa.gov, I'll debate you any day. You are dreaming. This is propaganda you're putting out. This is not science. Show me where we've observed a star forming. Nobody has ever observed a star forming. No one understands how star formation proceeds. It's really remarkable. Scientific American. All we see are stars blowing up, called a nova. If it's a big one, they call it a supernova, but it's the same thing. The star blew up. That happens every 30 years or so. That's the opposite of forming a star. How many stars are in the universe? A bunch, whole bunch. 70 billion trillion is the current estimate, and that's wildly an estimate. Stars have never been observed. The Bible claims very clearly that God made the stars. Now, I didn't see that either. So you're right, that would not be part of science. But stellar evolution is not part of science from the evolution side or the creation side. See, I admit mine is a religion. I take it on faith. Evolutionists do not admit that yours is a religion because you want it to be taught in the school system, and it should not be. Evolution shouldn't be taught in the schools at all, any part of evolution. Bigger question is, should we have public schools? But that's a different story. Genesis 15, God told Abraham to look to the stars and try to count them. Nobody's ever been able to count them. One estimate years ago, there was 76 sextillion stars, maybe 3 times as many as that. That's enough for every person on Earth to own 11 trillion of them to themselves. So there should be a new star forming if there are 76 trillion stars, and it happened over 13.7 billion years like they claim. Well, then we should see 9.7 million new stars forming every minute. Every minute. Should be 9.7 million of them. Nobody's ever seen one. So you can believe it if you want, but it's not science. Number 4, we have to have what's called organic evolution, the origin of life. Nobody has a clue how life can get started from non-living material. Put a frog in a blender, blend it up for a few minutes, and then I'll give you the blended frog and put it back together, make a frog. Make it come alive again. Organic evolution. You can believe this if you want, that life got started by itself, but there's plenty on the internet about organic evolution. I think it is a religious belief. It is not part of science. So thank you. Yeah, we got books on, videos on stellar evolution, how it doesn't happen. If you want, we get DVDs on that. Nobody knows how a mixture of lifeless chemicals spontaneously organize themselves into the first living cell. Nobody knows. It's not science. Primordial soup. Maybe the primordial soup came alive. That theory has been disproven a long time ago. So let me get up to the right or left one here. So number 5, macroevolution. This is changing from one kind of animal to another. That also has never been observed. That is not part of science. Large-scale evolution. It means the origin of species. I would avoid the word species because that's kind of a nebulous term. But there has never been anybody. What are the 4 processes of evolution? They talk about macroevolution. There are 339 recognized breeds of dogs in the world today.
You got 1 minute, Dr. Hovind, 1 minute.
They might have had a common ancestor called a dog. And you may get a big dog or a little dog, but you're going to get a dog every time. Every time. No exceptions. A dog, a wolf, coyote, and a banana. Ask a 4-year-old. Which one's not like the others? The banana. The Bible says they'll bring forth after their kind. That's all anybody's ever seen. That is science. So Darwin wrote a book, Origin of Species, changed the word. Microevolution, which means variations within the same kind. Now that one we could agree with, Derrick, that happens. Wild changes happen within the same kind. But you believe, I'm certain, that those changes we observe go further. You would say these 339 breeds of dogs is evidence that dogs and mosquitoes have a common ancestor. That is what you believe. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but do you believe dogs and mosquitoes have a common ancestor? And where's the evidence for that? Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Just on time there, Dr. Hovind. Thank you to the both of you for those openings. We're now moving on to the rebuttal round. We're going to have 5 minutes for rebuttal, and we are going to hand it over to Derrick. Let me just get Dr. Hovind out of the full screen here. And Derrick, you are muted. Therefore, when you begin your rebuttal, just make sure you unmute yourself, and I'll put 5 minutes on the clock. And as I did with the openings, I'll give a 1 minute warning. So go ahead, Derrick, whenever you're ready.
Sounds good. So what we heard right now is the fallacy of missing evidence, and it's contrary to the fact fallacy. All right. So I was writing things down because he Dr. Hovind said a lot there. So let me just try to touch on each one of those. I was giving the opinion of experts. What Dr. Hovind did was saying that the general population do not accept evolution. They accept creationism. That's called the fallacy of popular wisdom. So that's a logical fallacy. Also, he says that science in the past used to say that we came from, like the star, the planets revolved around the Earth. Okay, that's the genetic fallacy. So it's not, what we used to know in the past about science has no bearing on what we know about science now. That's the genetic fallacy. All right. So the next thing he said was that, he mentioned the fact that in that same context, one of the things I want to point out is that we're not saying that we're supplanting, say, what we think now with this new science of creationism. Creationism has been around for 2,000 years and beyond, more than that. People thought that the world was created by the gods and stuff like that. We still have no evidence for that. So you can't point at what science used to think and say, hey, we changed what we believe now to actually believe this new thing, which we believe to be true. And then turn around and say, the new thing that we're going to discover is something that we already believe, the vast majority of us believe incorrectly for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So, if you come up with a new idea, that would be great. So the heliocentric model won out over the geocentric model because the heliocentric model had the evidence for it. We have no evidence for the creationist model. We do have evidence for the evolutionary model, and we can get into the evidences for the evolutionary model. All right, now when it came to cosmic evolution, yes, that is evolution, absolutely. Because all evolution is change, and we know that the universe is changing. If you know about the Hubble Space Telescope, we can observe using standard candles that stars are actually moving away from us. That means the universe is changing, it's expanding, it's getting bigger, and we can calculate the rate at which it is moving away. Everything is moving away from each other, and just calculate that figure backwards, and we get to a point where everything was in one location, and that was the origin of the idea of a Big Bang. I personally accept the idea of cosmic origins, the model that Neil Turok proposes, which explains the imbalance between antimatter and matter particles. Of course, we know there's an imbalance there. Every pair was supposed to eliminate each other. The Neil Turok's model would suggest that as we're moving forward in time, our antimatter that wasn't annihilated at the origin is moving backwards in time. So that's how that's balanced out. It balanced the equation. If you think of a number line, you have -1, 0, +1 coming in both directions from the origin, of moving in the infinite direction in the positive, but simultaneously moving in the infinite direction in the past. And so I'm that's the model I usually go with. He said that hydrogen changes the people. Yes, we know that takes place. Yes, stars are predominantly made of hydrogen. There's some helium and lithium, as Dr. Hovind mentions. But in the hearts of stars is a nuclear furnace that actually goes through what is called nucleosynthesis, in which hydrogen's atoms bond together to create helium. Those helium atoms bond together to create the heavy elements like the lithium and so on and so forth, the oxygen, the carbon, the stuff that we're made out of, up to iron. At iron, yes, more energy has to be put in, but forces of gravity do cause stars to explode.
1 minute.
Producing the heavier elements. Okay, yes. So yes, we observe stars being formed in nebula. If you had a telescope, you can actually look in the Horsehead Nebula and actually see basically a nursery of stars in the various stages of development. So yes, we do observe that. What else did he say? That organic evolution. Yes. It depends on what you define as life. We'll get into that. But you have that. If it's science, it has to be a natural explanation. That's what science studies. It studies natural phenomena. And yes, depending on how you define life, it's very easy to see that life. We know what organic chemistry is. It's just molecules that have carbon in it. That's all it is. It's nothing special about it. And okay, we'll leave it at that. I guess we'll get into biogenesis. But yes, biogenesis is is an evolutionary process as well. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you there, Derrick, for your 5-minute rebuttal. Just on time. I appreciate that. And also thank you to the chat for your super chat, super stickers, and great questions. You guys are superstars. We'll obviously be getting to as many of those questions as we can. Therefore, then just tag me. And we are going to be going into Dr. Hovind's rebuttal round. I'm going to get Derrick out of full screen here. And Kent, I will unmute you for you, and you can begin your rebuttal. 5 minutes whenever you're ready.
Well, thank you so much, sir. Appreciate that. And Derrick, I appreciate your attempt at defending what I think is a completely defunct religious idea of evolution. I think you're on the wrong side, and you will find out one day for sure, hopefully before you die and have to face the Creator himself. You said so many things I'd love to take time to go through. Argument from ignorance, because the majority of scientists believe in evolution. I don't know where you're getting even those numbers that the majority of scientists believe, and you got who decides who's a scientist, but that's another story. So many things I'd love to rebut. Let's just pick a few highlights here. You said I was giving the fallacy of missing evidence. The fact that there's no evidence therefore proves it. Is that what you're trying to say? We don't have any evidence for our theory, and Hovind pointed it out, but that proves it's true. You guys have the missing evidence. Nobody's ever seen a frog produce a non-frog, or a dog produce a non-dog, or a mosquito produce a non-mosquito. Nobody's ever seen this. Never. It's not science. There is lots of evidence isn't there. It's not an argument for missing evidence. It's a fallacy. It's the truth. There is no farmer in the world has ever observed any plant or animal produce anything other than its kind, like the Bible said would happen. Farmers plant corn, they expect to get corn every time. But you believe corn and mosquitoes and whales are related. That's not science. There is no evidence for that. You can believe that if you like. It's a religious belief. Let's see. You kept calling it creationism. I think you got the wrong term, Derrick. It's evolutionism. The ism goes on evolution, like communism, Nazism, socialism. Okay. You say there's lots of evidence for evolution. I pointed out there are 6 different meanings. I'd like you to show me what evidence you have for, let's take number 5, the lowest one, macroevolution, where any animal produced what anybody would consider a different kind of offspring. Where's the evidence for any macroevolution? You said there's lots of it. Pick the best 3 or 4. And you said something I've never heard anybody in the world say before. This is a whole new one to me. As we're moving forward in time, I believe you said antimatter is moving backward in time, so it's balancing out to 0. Where exactly is this antimatter? I'd like to see that. Is that part of science? Give me a jar of that. I guess you couldn't put it in a jar, could you? I think that is a really wild idea somebody sold you. And you said you like to look at natural phenomena. I have to go back and listen to get your verbiage correct. Let me just point out something to you, Derrick. I don't know if you noticed this or not, but in Matthew chapter 19, Jesus said, have you not read that he which made them at the beginning, made them male and female? Jesus claimed the creation of Adam and Eve was the beginning. Same thing in Mark 10:6. From the beginning of the creation, God made them male and female. Romans 5 says, by one man, sin entered into the world, and death by sin. Why do we have death and suffering in the world? In your evolution worldview, death brought man into the world. All the misfits and half-formed and 98% formed died so that we could get here. It was a long trail of blood and suffering. That's the evolution theory. Bible says, no, God made a perfect world and man ruined it. Man's sin brought death into the world. The first man, Adam, was made a living soul. The Bible's clear that Adam was the first man and Eve's the mother of all living. So the Bible certainly is clear. So Jesus said the beginning of the creation was when God made Adam and Eve. The Bible says nothing died until man sinned. The Bible says we all came from Adam and Eve. That's what it says. Adam was 130 when his son was born, and that boy was 105 when his son was born. You go through and you graph out the dates. I've done this and got charts we sell in our bookstore at drdino.com. You can buy this for a chart for you, have your company come over for a placemat. But the Bible dates that up to about 4000 BC, which would be about 6,000 years ago. So Derrick's position is clearly calling the Bible a lie. Whether you want to say that out loud or not, you are saying the Bible is lying. You're calling Jesus a liar. He said there was death. You're saying there was death before man even got here. And you're trusting conventional dating and fossils of the layers they're found in. Derrick, there is no geologic column. I taught earth science for 15 years. I'll debate any evolutionist or geologist you know. This geologic column with the Cenozoic, Mesozoic, Paleozoic, Archeozoic does not exist anywhere in the world. It doesn't exist except the textbooks. They tell the kids the top layer's younger. Stop and think. Top layer's younger. Where's it coming from? Outer space? What do you mean the top layer's younger? No, all the layers. If I shake up a jar and it settles into layers, is the top layer younger? No, they were all in the jar at the same time. Anyway, how can the top layer be younger? It can't. It's not younger. It didn't come from outer space. So it's a fact the earth has layers of sedimentary rock. Now that's a fact. Evolutionist religion says they formed slowly over millions of years. That doesn't explain where the material's coming from.
30 seconds. 30 seconds.
Creationist says these layers all got shuffled up in the flood. And you guys always try to erase that line between the two and make your interpretation part of the fact. The geologic column is actually the Bible for the evolutionist. You can only find it in the textbooks. There is no such thing as a geologic column. I think you've swallowed a bunch of baloney in your education. You start over, Derrick. Go ahead.
All right. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for the openings and the rebuttals. That really did fly by. The chat is having a great time, and this is a great debate so far. So we're now moving to the discussion portion. We will make sure to keep it as equally timed as possible, giving both debaters the feeling that they are, of course, being able to make the points they need to make. Since Kent just finished, why don't we hand it over to Derrick to start us off with a few points or maybe a question that he would like to ask Kent. So Derrick, the floor is yours. Just make sure you are unmuted, and we'll go from there.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So as relates to the sedimentary layers and the geologic columns. Where's this new Earth coming from? It's coming from volcanoes like lava. And also, when volcanoes erupt, it belches out newly reactive chemicals and stuff like that that was in the center of the Earth because it was heated. It pretty much, it's like it's new. And then once it's pushed out into the atmosphere and it settles, we have in this ash and in this volcano layer, we have radioactive elements in it. And then those get trapped in the soil, and we can date those to see which ones are newer based on the half-life. So that's how we could determine how old each layer is. Of course, we know about plate tectonics and how this, there's areas in the Earth where crust is submerging in. We know there's areas where new Earth is being formed. So that's how we know about the layers. And during earthquakes, a lot of these layers get exposed through cracks and fissures and stuff like that. So that's how we know that. Okay, am I saying that Jesus is a liar? No, I believe he, if he existed, I believe that he believed what he was saying. That isn't to call someone a liar. That just means that they didn't have the right information. Do I believe that the Bible is holy and came down from God? No. And the reason why I say that is because there are many things in the Bible that we know to be untrue. For example, we know that the story of Moses parting the Red Sea. If we look at the Red Sea, we're not going to, we should see, according to the story, thousands of Egyptians in their chariots and everything else like that in the Red Sea. We don't find it. So that story did not happen. If you actually go to archaeologists and everything, anthropologists, they would tell you that the stories of there being 40,000 Israelites in Egypt moving in a line into the Sinai Peninsula just doesn't make any sense. As a matter of fact, the distance between that area, they're saying if you stuck 40,000, and it took them like 40 years to get from Egypt to the Sinai area. If you just put them in a line, 40,000 people, they will already be there. If you just line them up one by one, 40,000. So there wasn't 40,000 Israelites that was there. That's not true. Egyptians kept good records. They had no documentation, no recorded history of this event ever taking place. So that's not true. You also said
actually, if you want to, maybe stop there, Derrick. That was about 2 minutes and 30 seconds. And no problem. We just want to.
Yeah, it's not a rebuttal. It's not a rebuttal. Yeah,
right.
My fault. Yeah.
Oh no, that's okay. We'll just make sure that it's equally timed and try and keep it to one topic at a time. So I appreciate that, Derrick. Therefore, Kent, you have about 2 minutes and 30 seconds as well. Like I said, we'll keep it equally timed. Go ahead.
All right. Well, thank you. I'd like to point out the obvious, that lava coming from a volcano is not new material. It is recycled from, it was already here, Derrick. It just got melted and resettled. It didn't form new material. The Earth was all formed at the same time, whether it squirts out from the inside in liquid form and cools down. And there's several different types of rock. You're referring to what's called igneous rock. That's all volcanoes do produce. Igneous from the word ignite. It's been lit up on fire. Ash, volcanic ash, or lava, or pumice is igneous rock that is not sedimentary or metamorphic rock. Well, it could be metamorphic if certain conditions. Okay, so then you mentioned so how you can believe that this is new material coming to the Earth. When a volcano blows up and settles layers, it doesn't make the Earth grow larger. These layers of the geologic column do not exist anyplace. There is no geologic column. All over the world, petrified trees are found standing up, connecting all these layers. You need to come visit Dinosaur Adventureland. And as far as the Red Sea crossing, if you want to pick on that, I believe the Bible is true. I'm not telling everybody that you got to pay for that to be taught in the schools, because you may not believe that. That's fine. I believe it's true. I don't think anything's ever been proven false. But I think the Red Sea crossing has certainly been proven true. At the south end of this beach, which is right on the Red Sea, this is all on my seminar, part 7. You can go to drdino.com and watch the question answer period. A pillar was found that was set up by King Solomon, 1000 BC, and it says on the pillar that this is the place where they crossed the Red Sea. And right there, they find an underwater land bridge. So it's 9 miles across. The water is about 900 feet deep. There's plenty of stuff about this. When they went scuba diving down there, they found human skeletons. They found chariot wheels. There's one right there. chariot hubs, chariot cabs with no wheels on them. The Bible says God took the wheels off. I'm sorry, Derrick, you're behind on your research on that one. They did find the Red Sea crossing. They did cross. And Mount Sinai's over in Arabia. Sinai's not, the Bible says Sinai's in Arabia. It's not in the Sinai Peninsula. They didn't cross the Gulf of Suez. They crossed the Gulf of Aqaba, which is the other finger of the Red Sea. So there's the top Mount Sinai, still black from when it burned. So watch my video number 7 where we talk a lot about this, or go to the website WyattMuseum.com. They've got a ton of stuff on there about the split boulder that the water came gushing out of. So I think you're mistaken. Anyway, you said, do you believe the Bible is holy? No. You think it's untrue because it's got untruths in it. Derrick, you're going to face that statement again before God one of these days, sooner than you wish. I feel sorry for you. I'd like to see you get converted, give your heart to the Lord. You're calling Jesus a liar. You're calling the Bible a liar, which is fine. You're calling billions of people on the planet, certainly hundreds of millions of people, liars, or at least stupid, uneducated, whatever you want to call it. So I feel sorry for you. Radioactive, we could talk a long time about that if you'd like. Let's see, home, radiocarbon dating. If you think carbon dating works, you are mistaken. The lower leg of a mammoth dated 15,000 years old, but the skin was 21,000 years old. How did that happen? Of course, that was in 49 when they first invented it. Back in 63, they took living mollusk shells and carbon dated them. They're 2,300 years old. They're still alive. This guy said, if a carbon date supports our theories, we put it in the main text. If it doesn't entirely contradict them, we put it in a footnote. If it's out of date, we drop it. If they don't get the date they want, they drop it. Freshly killed seal was carbon dated 1,300 years old in the Arctic Journal. Of course, that's 50 years ago. Is it getting any better? The troubles of radiocarbon dating are undeniably deep and serious. You just watch my video 7. I cover all this, okay? Anthropological Journal of Canada said that. They took a living snail and carbon dated it 27,000 years old. It was still alive. Something is seriously wrong. Carbon dating, potassium, argon, rubidium, strontium, lead-208, lead-206, I'll discuss any of them you would like. All of them are based on the obvious assumptions that we can know the initial content, that we know the decay rate has never been changed, and we know there's been no contamination. It just isn't, it's not common sense. They dated human fossils, used 2 different methods, said they should have been 250,000 years old. They said, wow, they're coming back 27 to 53,000 years old. What's wrong here? Well, even that was a 96% error in the dates that they got. So, Derrick, if somebody taught you to trust carbon dating, you really been bamboozled, okay? One part of a mammoth was 29,000 years old. Another was 44,000. They said in the last 2 years, we finally got an absolute date for the Gandong beds. As the interesting value of 300,000 years plus or minus 300,000 years. That's an interesting number. Living penguins dated 8,000 years old. Materials from layers where dinosaurs were found were dated at 34,000 years old. Interesting. So I could go for a long time, and I do, on video 7, seminar 7. It's 5 hours long, covering all kinds of things. When you date a sample of known age, carbon dating does not work. When you date a sample of unknown age, it is assumed to work. I feel sorry that you've been taught that stuff, and I feel sorrier that you have believed it, and I feel real sorry that you're teaching that to other people. That's simply wrong. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so what I'll do here, because Derrick, if you want, because I want to keep this as fair as equally time as possible. If you want, you can take 3 minutes so we can get back to equally time. And then after that, Derrick, if you wanted to maybe pick 1 or 2 points, and then at that point, we'll just kind of keep it more free-flowing and organic. So, Derrick, just make sure you unmute yourself, take your time, and then we'll go from there.
Absolutely. So Dr. Hovind said the reason for those discrepancies in the dating, contamination. So yes, contamination does happen. One of the things we have to keep in mind is that the best people who are qualified to talk about radiometric dating, not just carbon dating, because carbon dating is only good for up to, I think, 50,000 years or something like that. But there's other radiometric dating in some of those Dr. Hovind mentioned, especially uranium dating and thorium dating. If you want to go into geological time, we know the half-lives. There are such a thing as nuclear scientists. These are the types of scientists who can create a nuclear bomb. These are the types of scientists who create nuclear power plants. So I would assume that they know a little bit more about nuclear decay rates and everything else like that than you, Dr. Hovind, with all due respect. And for some reason, they're still convinced that we can successfully date things. So either the people who are smart enough to understand the science and actually create new technologies from it are wrong, or common wisdom is right. Excuse me, in common wisdom are right, or common wisdom is wrong, and the actual experts who actually can make technology from the science are actually the correct ones. I'll go with the people who can actually make the technology. That's where I will fall on that. What else did you mention? Oh, one other thing too. Who was Cain and Abel's wives? And how did they produce additional offspring? Did they have an incestuous relationship with Eve? That doesn't seem very holy or biblical. So clearly, the stories that are found in the Bible are not to be taken literally. Now, I'm not saying that we know for certainty that God does not exist. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that if you accept evolution, you have to reject the wisdom that is found in the Bible. There's a lot of good stuff in the Bible. There's a lot of wisdom found in the Bible. But to take a book that was written thousands of years ago by human authors who did not know what we know about the world today and accept that in the face of real evidence and real technology that acts as proof of concept of these concepts that are being espoused by scientists, I believe is absurd. Now, I'm not calling anyone stupid. What I'm saying is that we, of course, grow up, we learn these stories, they touch our heart in some way. We like them, we want to support them, we want to believe in them. And I'm not trying to take that away from people, but it's just not factual. You know, you can still keep the good points of the Bible, you can still keep the wisdom, but don't treat the Bible as a history book. It's not historic. All right.
Awesome. Just on time, actually. So this is perfect. Perfectly equally timed so far. We'll hand it over to Dr. Hovind. I know there's a couple points and I think a question in there from Derrick. So why don't we go from there? Go ahead, Dr. Hovind.
Well, thank you, sir. Yeah, I appreciate that. This common question, where did Cain and Abel get their wives? This is a great, reasonable question. The first thing to finally become alive out of the primordial soup, the very first thing, who did it marry? You'd have to get two creatures to evolve to start life to begin with, and they got to be of the opposite sex at the same time in history over billions of years and in the same place. And they got to find each other and be interested. You got a whole bunch of problems on your side there, son. Anyway, Cain, the Bible says very clearly in Genesis chapter 5 that Adam lived 130 years and had Seth. Before that, they had Cain and Abel, but the dates are not given. Cain killed Abel. Cain ran off into the woods or whatever he left, wherever Adam and Eve were. And it says he knew his wife. But if you read the Bible, Genesis chapter 5, it says Adam and Eve lived after they begat Seth 800 years and begat sons and daughters. How many kids could you have in 800 years? A lot. You guys got how many in how many years? 2 in 1 year. 2 in 1 year, yeah. You get 2 at a time. Okay, so Jim Bob Duggar is a good friend of mine. 19 kids in 23 years, pretty good average. So I think in 800 years they could have a lot of kids. So no, Cain and Seth and Adam's children, Abel was killed, had to marry sisters. They didn't have to marry their mother. No incestuous relationship. Now, there was no laws against marrying sisters until 2,500 years later when God gave the law to Moses. So it's not a problem at all. I think the evolutionist has the real problem when it comes to the origin of sexual reproduction. A gigantic problem, because neither one can reproduce by themselves, and both of them had unbelievably complex structures and ability, and it's way more. I taught biology and anatomy for years. It is really complicated. It's not just a simple thing to make a baby. On the surface level, yeah, but there's a lot going on behind the scenes to make this happen. This isn't common sense to say it just happened. You believe that the male and female came from a star exploding. I think the burden of proof is on you to prove such a thing. I think that's ludicrous. If you wish to believe those things, all you evolutionists can believe whatever you want. I don't care. But you don't stop there. You want everybody to be forced to pay for that dumb idea to be taught to everybody in the public school system. Now, that's where it becomes criminal, in my humble opinion. Go ahead.
All right. So the origin of sexual reproduction, there's textbooks on that. It's not a difficult question to answer. We already have examples of living organisms on the planet that not only are asexual, but change from sex to sex. So this is not, like I said, we actually have living examples that give us a history, more or less, of how the sexual reproduction process evolved in time. Yes, so you can't get organic chemistry until you have carbon. Stars will have to explode. Well, first, carbon would have to be formed in the star first through nuclear synthesis. The star would have to explode and blow that carbon dust out into space, and under the force of gravity, that dust would then collect around a star in what is called an accretion disk, and it would eventually form through the process of gravity into balls called planets. So yes, that's how we have carbon. Carbon is pretty abundant around solar systems in what are called second and third generation stars. We know that our current solar system is either a second or third generation solar system, or our sun is a second or third generation star, because it has an accretion disk. So we already know that. Now, how do you define life? Life, of course, is chemicals. In the case of life, organic chemistry, meaning carbon-based chemistry, that does a few things. Metabolizes energy. There's a lot of things that metabolizes energy. It also grows. There's a lot of things that grow, like crystals, which is inorganic. It respond to stimuli. There's a lot of things that respond to stimuli, such as photovoltaic cells. Those respond to stimuli. So when you put all of these things together, if it does all of those things, if it metabolizes energy, if it responds to stimuli, if it grows, if it has some heritability, so like clay, it has a heritable mechanism. Things can be introduced that could change the development of clay. So we have inorganic examples of all of these things. In the case of life, it just so happens to be organic and do all of those features, and we then call that life. It's organic chemistry, carbon-based chemistry. That's all it is. Now, according to the evolutionary model, of course, sexual reproduction did not just spring into existence. No, it began through a process originally called mitosis, where a single-celled organism will actually split into two daughter cells. All right. There are a ton of organisms on our planet that are still single-celled that split through mitosis. Sexual reproduction is not required. Now, one of the things that we've learned about bacteria, for example, is that, and this is a single-celled organism, is that it keeps splitting until it pretty much peters out. It stops splitting, and it can continue to live. But in order for it to reboot and start splitting again, it copulates with another bacteria where they actually exchange genes. When that process happens, then it can start splitting over and over and over again. So it begins like that. So the sexual process actually developed from single-cell organisms who copulate to continue to split through mitosis. Real simple, is laid out. We have real-world examples of single-cell organisms that behave in this way. We observe that, and then we use induction to bring us back to the logical conclusion that if multicellular life came from a single-cell organism, we have examples where, like for example, there are snakes that change sex, there's frogs that change sex. There are some animals that reproduce without the opposite sex even being present. So we have these examples. So it's no big mystery.
Okay, go ahead, Dr. Hovind. The floor is yours. Take as much time as you need.
Well, yes, sir. Thank you. There's 50 different points I'd like to make here. The fact that we can see a variety of animals today that use a variety of different methods, asexual, sexual, mitosis, meiosis, etc., that is not any evidence that it happened, one came from the other. The fact that some animals can reproduce either way, they can reproduce with or without a sexual partner, that's, I would think, an example of great design. In case something happens, the population dwindles down in a certain area where there's only one left, they can still go ahead and keep the race alive. The Bible says very clearly, 20 times in the first 7 chapters, that the plants and animals will bring forth after their kind. Do you know of any examples that you can show us that we can observe where, let's take something with a very short life expectancy or short generation time, like bacteria? Certain bacteria, you could they get born, grow up, get married, have babies in 20 minutes. So you can get a whole bunch of generations in one day. one person could observe this colony of bacteria over the equivalent of many, many, many thousands of generations, which would be maybe millions of years of human, since we get 16 or 18 or 20 years before we reach sexual maturity and typically reproduce babies. So I think you would be squeezing equivalent of millions of years of elephants' growth, for instance, down into one observable lifetime. All they've ever observed in the laboratory with all the experiments done with bacteria is they're still a bacteria. They might be resistant to some heat better than the others, resistant to certain diseases, but it's still a bacteria. All they've ever observed with the 339 breeds of dogs, you get little ones and big ones, is they're still a dog. And except for maybe a few mechanical problems, they're still infertile. So that's all that's observed. Derrick, what I'm trying to say is science, the purpose of the debate is evolution science? And I say, no, it's not. We observe dogs produce dogs, big ones, little ones. We observe bacteria make bacteria over thousands of generations. That's all we observe. That is science. It is not science to claim that dogs and bacteria have a common ancestor. That's religion. And you're welcome to believe it. But quit calling it science and quit pretending and quit making everybody pay for that dumb idea to be taught in the school system. You guys who believe this stuff, evolution, that we all had a common ancestor, are welcome to go start a private school and make the kids pay tuition and teach them whatever you want to teach them. This is America, the land of the free and the home of the slave. So go ahead and teach them whatever you want. But I don't want to pay for that. That's not observable science. We do not observe any plant or animal or bacteria ever produce something other than its kind, which is what the Bible said would happen. A Chihuahua is still a dog, barely, but still a dog. Okay? So that's all that's ever been observed. You said life is simply carbon-based chemistry. Boy, I taught biology 15 years. You better study how complex life is. It's way more complex than you think. Okay, go ahead.
Well, certainly life is complex. No one argues that. Yes, and it takes a long time for that complexity to develop over time. What evolution is, I don't even like the term, but all we're saying is that it had a very simple beginning and complexity got built into it over time through a process of mutations occurring. Those mutations that were detrimental die off, of course, as you explained earlier, and the ones that are beneficial, and not even necessarily beneficial, but that are beneficial and benign, move on into the future. And that's it. And over a long period of time, yes, complexity has developed. There is no scientifically recognized kind. Kind is poorly defined, is vague, and that's a fallacy. So if you're using terminology that's poorly defined and vague, then you can't really argue on behalf of that. So what is a kind exactly? Is it a clade? Is it a kingdom? Is it a phylum? You will have to explain what you mean by a kind. At which point does it stop being a kind? We know through genetic study that all of us are made essentially of G, T, A, and C, these nucleotides. We know that we can there are things that we can look at called the biological clock, and we can see when changes occur, and we can date a steady rate that happens. We also have fossil evidence of transitional forms. And not only do we have fossil evidence of transitional forms, there are still living transitional forms that are around us. If you look at the platypus, it seems to be a mix of a bird and a mammal. If you look at, I think it's called the Insecta, it's the only mammal on the planet that still lays eggs. You have some snakes that are specialized to give birth to live snakes and some that still lay eggs. So we see there are transitional species that exist today. So that, like I said, the evidence is overwhelming. We know that we are all related, and we know we're all related because we all have the same genes. And the only difference is that, and one of the things is, you never really transition out of your quote unquote kind. A mammal is still a mammal. A mammal is still an animal is still a eukaryote. So all of these things is inherited as we move up and gain more complexity. So please define what a kind is. Is a dog kind different from a wolf kind? Is a wolf kind different from the canine kind? Is that different from the mammal kind? So you haven't really explained that. So I'll leave that there.
Awesome. Derrick and Dr. Hovind, that was about 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Let's do this. Actually, so since Derrick started, let's give Kent equal time, about between 2 and 3 minutes. Then we will do one more round. We can consider it concluding thoughts. We'll hand it back to Derrick. We'll end it with Kent, just so we can have some time to get to the questions as well. Time's flying by. It's been over an hour, and it's been a great debate. So, Dr. Hovind, take your time. You got between 2 and 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you, sir. The fact that we have similarities with other animals could just as easily prove a common designer, as opposed to your theory that it's a common ancestor. We do see a lot of similarity. Most computers, Steve, are all computer codes based on the simple binary code, zeros and ones? Yes. All of them are? Yes. Okay. Well, the code, CATG, that you refer to in the genetic code of all life forms is quaternary, not binary, which is what, 16 times more complex. Just the code, the base of the code. The fact that we see a lot of similarities between Microsoft PowerPoint and Microsoft Word, I would guess there are probably hundreds of thousands of identical lines of code in Microsoft Word and Microsoft PowerPoint. Does that prove they both evolved from Morse code from an explosion in a print shop? No, people are designing these codes. There's full-time people. That's all they do all day long is write codes. It takes intelligence to do this. And the codes that we use, the binary code, is simple, 0 and 1. That's it. It's how you arrange them. The code, the CATG or GACT, as you refer to it, either way, is incredibly complicated, just the code. And the fact that all life forms use this same base code is not evidence for a common ancestor. It's proof of the same guy writing the code. I don't know how you guys can't see that. Anyway, I'm real curious to get questions from the audience here to see what we get. I think I'm getting absolutely nowhere with Derrick, but keep studying. Let's all keep climbing the mountain of truth, and I'll be waiting for you at the top, Derrick. Okay.
Awesome. Well, I just want to say thank you to the both of you for making this a fun, respectful, cordial debate, incredibly easy to moderate. So let's hand it over to Derrick for your response, and maybe at the same time, Derrick, kind of wrap up your thoughts, address any points you feel like you want to address, and then we'll hand it to Kent, and we'll get into some good questions. So go ahead, Derrick.
Absolutely, absolutely. So what we just heard there was called the equivocation fallacy. So when people say that GATC is a code, they don't actually mean it's an actual code. It's actually physical chemicals, nucleotides. It's not a code. We can label it as a code, and it's not surprising that people did model various ideas based on naturally occurring things. And the reason why is because these naturally occurring things are possible, considering the laws of physics, and they just use those things that are possible to make advances in technology. This is what is called scientists that do cybernetics do. So they look at things that are found in nature and try to design things based on that, because in the natural environment, based on the laws of physics, these designs are possible. All right. So and it was also a misuse of vague expression. Let's talk about the idea of evolution, which is really the idea of emergent biology, a science. Does it use the scientific methods to reach this conclusion? Yes, it does. Does it concern itself exclusively with the physical and natural world? Yes, it does. Does it explain the mechanism that brought life into existence? Yes, it does. Is it open to revision? Yes, that's a hallmark of science. Does it have any verifiable evidence to support it exclusively? Yes, it does. And is it logically possible? Again, yes, it does. So yes, it meets all the hallmarks of being considered a science by the definition of science by scientists, not the colloquial use of the word, but by the actual scientists themselves. Now, the alternative that we have on our hand, if evolution by way of natural selection and the various other forms of evolutionary theories are wrong, you would think that creationism is the likely alternative. This, of course, is a false dichotomy. We could just be, the way we understand evolution now may be different from what we may understand in the future. So there are many scenarios or natural explanations for how we can get here, even if the scientists are wrong. Of course, with all the overwhelming evidence that we have no reason to conclude that they are. But creationism is not the alternative. All right. And the reason why it's not the alternative is because it introduces a supernatural element, i.e., God. I would ask Dr. Hovind, if he would, to define God? Is he an immaterial being, all-knowing, all-powerful, all the omnis? If that's your conception of God, if that's what you're defining, then it is a concept. It is, if it's immaterial, it cannot interact with the physical world. So if I was to lay out a logical argument, matter of fact, can I share screens? Let me share screens right quick.
If you want to click share screen, and then I can, I'll approve it so everybody can see.
Okay. Let me just lay out that. Can you see that?
No, not so. You might. So you want to click the middle box, and then it'll highlight, and then click share screen, and it should pop up.
All right. Let me see. Let me click share entire screen. Yeah. For some reason, let me see. Share screen. It's not doing it. Hold on, let me cancel. Let me try it again.
You'll see it's the fourth icon right next to right in between cam and invite, if it's the same for you. Click the share screen, but when it pops up in the middle, Derrick, you'll want to click it.
Oh, okay, I see you. All right.
Yeah.
All right, you can see my screen now?
There we go. Yeah, it's good.
All right. So,
good.
All right. So creationism is impossible. If you could I'll just read the argument right quick. Immaterial things cannot physically interact with physical things. To create or design a physical thing or system, it must be interacted with physically. Conclusion: nothing was ever created or designed by an immaterial thing. Immaterial things such as numbers, abstract concepts, words, codes, those don't create anything. All right. Argument 2. Living organisms are physical things. The universe is a physical system. God is defined usually as an immaterial thing. If we refer back to argument 1, we can conclude that God did not create life, God did not create the universe, and God does not exist. At least he does not exist physically. He exists as a concept in the minds of human beings. I would like the Dr. Hovind to respond to that argument if he can.
Okay, well, thank you, Derrick. That was just under 5 minutes, so that's good. You were able to address the point and also kind of wrap up your thoughts there in the form of a concluding statement. So, Dr. Hovind, you have equal time. Therefore, go ahead whenever you're ready and take your time.
Yeah, I'm surprised Derrick thinks he's the one who gets to decide what God can and cannot do. I think God may have a different opinion about that. But as far as a physical world cannot be affected by a non-physical thing, I think you'd have to explain things to me like love, emotions, hatred, jealousy. Can non-physical things like emotions affect a physical body? I think anybody would tell you, yeah, how you feel and your emotions, which is a non-physical thing, certainly affects the physical thing. People get sick because of certain emotional feelings. So love, hatred, so God is outside of what we call time, space, matter. I did a debate at Embry-Riddle University many years ago against 3 professors at once, and one of them asked me the question, where did God come from? You can Google Where Did God Come From by Kent Hovind. It's got over 70 million views altogether. My 2-minute answer, it's only 2 minutes long. The question assumes that God is limited by the things that we are. Derrick, I don't think you have the right concept of God in your mind. If you think that God, if he happens to be immaterial, therefore cannot become material, like i.e. God becoming a man, Jesus Christ, or God creating out of nothing, actually creating just by speaking. He can speak things into existence. Let there be. That's all through Genesis chapter 1. So the God that I worship is not limited by time, space, or matter, and I think that's your problem. We have time, space, matter, a continuum, has to come into existence at the same time. Time, which is a trinity, past, present, future. Space, which is a trinity, length, width, height. You can't have just one or two. You got one, you got 3. And matter, solid, liquid, gas, have to come into existence in a certain order. Time, space, matter. The God who created them is outside of them. He's not limited by time. This is not 2020 in heaven. God's not waiting for the election this November. God's already standing at your funeral. He knows. He's already there. He's outside of time, space, and matter. That's the God that I worship anyway. He's not limited by any of those. Now, do I understand all that? No, I don't claim to. I freely admit mine is a religion. You do not, and you should, you do not freely admit that evolution is a religion. You believe mosquitoes and whales have a common ancestor, which was a rock, which came from a dot of nothing exploding. That's a religious belief. I think an extremely dumb one, but you're welcome to it. I just resent having to pay for that to be taught to the kids in school. That's not part of science. You mentioned so many things. That evolution is a science. Yes, it is. Does it explain life? Yes, it does. Is it verifiable? Yes, yes. You went through all this like it's some kind of checklist. None of them are true, Derrick. None. We need to have another debate, at least one of those one at a time. Tonight, the topic is evolution science? I stand absolutely not. Evolution is not observable. It's not demonstrable. Nobody's ever seen any animal or plant produce a different kind of offspring. Never. You can believe it if you want. Go ahead.
Awesome. Awesome. Just on time. Okay. I want to thank both you gentlemen for a great debate. It's flown by. We've also got some great questions from the audience. So we'll get through as many of them as we can. What I like to do for the Q&A, whoever's question it is, of course, we'll give the other debater a response, but whoever the question was for gets the last word. So it looks like we've got Derrick, you're kind of in the lion's den. We got a lot of creationists. But what I'll do, I appreciate it. You're a good sport. What I'll do is I'll make sure that I pick out, because we do have some for Kent as well. So we'll make it as fair as possible, and I'll pick out maybe 3 for each. So let's see here. Okay, so first question for Derrick. Derrick, how do you address genetic entropy? Man is getting worse and not better due to mutation accumulation. Derrick, take your time.
Yeah. Entropy is the cause for mutations. Some mutations are negative, some mutations are positive. So that's all there is to it. I know people would like to claim that the stories of the Bible is true. Man used to live 900 years and so on and so forth. There's no evidence for that. You only have anecdotal stories written down by men who did not know what we know now. If we actually look at anthropology, we see that people who were living in those times, who were writing the Bible, only lived to about 40 years if they were lucky. Most of them died before the age of 30. And we know that by actually studying their teeth and bone growth and everything else like that. So those stories are just not true. So we know that we're continually evolving, but the problem of entropy, of genetic entropy, is not a problem. It's like billions of years in the future. They talk about the Y chromosome eventually being unable to continue to pass itself on, but the Y chromosome is one of the most long-lived chromosomes that are out there. It undergoes very little change or a very small mutation rate over time, and that's why we can actually trace populations through the Y chromosome back, because it is such a solid and stable chromosome. And I did just want to just say right quick, time, space, and matter is not a trinity. There is only space-time, which is 4, so not 3. So it's length, width, height, and time. And when it comes to matter, it's actually liquid, gas, solids, and plasma. That's actually 4 too. All right. So yeah.
Okay, thank you for that response, Derrick. Dr. Hovind, did you have a response to that as well?
Well, plasma is just a hotter gas, okay? Some solids are more solid than others too, but that's a different story. Okay. You claim they did not live to be 900. There's lots of anecdotal evidence of what's called the Golden Age. Just Google Golden Age. Lots of cultures in the past taught the man used to live to be 1,000. And you're saying you're going from their teeth. Well, if they were living to be 1,000, you would assume that they were designed to live a long time and maybe designed for the teeth to last a long time. There's a dentist who did a whole research on that, about the human teeth and how they could last hundreds of years under proper conditions, but that's a different story. And you said some mutations are negative, some are positive. I'd like you to give a couple examples of positive mutations that add new genetic material. You're dreaming, Derrick. It doesn't happen. The mutations are harmful, fatal, or neutral. They do nothing. Nobody's ever given an example of a mutation that adds new information. Never been one example in all the histories found in the world of a mutation that added new genetic information. You'd have to have a whole lot of new genetic information to go from an amoeba to a human. There's a lot of new information has to be added. Not one example has ever been given, certainly not scientifically proven. So this is why I point out continually, and you won't accept it, I'm sure, but you believe, capital B, believe that it happened. Okay, great. Believe whatever you want. That's not science. You have a religion and don't even know it. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. And as always, Derrick, since it's your question, you get the final word. And what we'll do for the final word, just so we can get through as many questions as possible, we'll just make them a little more quick, I guess, than the initial responses. So go ahead, Derrick.
Indicate, well, plasma is not a hot gas. It is hot. but the electrons actually separate from the atom, so that's why it acts as a different type of substance. So a plasma is different from a gas. Once again, if you go back to ancient time, like the ancient Egyptians took really good records. They were alive during the time when the Bible was being written, and we have no evidence or no example of any written record of any person living back in that age, living for 1,000 years. That doesn't exist. So anybody in cultures around the world can make up stories. We believe that every single culture around the world did make up stories, except the particular story that we actually believe in. So that's not surprising. And the last thing, yes, there are numerous examples where genetic information is added. Matter of fact, whole genes are added to some species, especially some plants. They're like hexagonal. I forget the term. Also, if you look at, say, a zebra, for example, there are some zebras that only have like 32 chromosomes. There are other zebras that have up to like 46 chromosomes or more. And they all, of course, share common origin. They all look the same. They all do the same thing for the most part. But some have only 30 some odd 30 some odd chromosomes, and others that have 40 some odd chromosomes. So yes, we do see examples where chromosomes are being added. If you look at and one beneficial mutation for humans anyway is lactose tolerance. So in pastoral societies, we did evolve in a way to those people that lived in pastoral societies did evolve to be able to consume milk into adulthood. So yes, we do have examples of that too.
Okay, well, thanks for that response, Derrick, and thanks for that engaging back and forth. So next question is from X-Man. This one is for you, Dr. Hovind. He says, standing for truth, question for Kent. What is the best evidence for the global flood? Take your time, Dr. Hovind.
Well, boy, there'll be many different lines of evidence. We certainly have anecdotal evidence. I think they've discovered 330 now legends from different cultures around the world where they talked about, yes, boys and girls, there was a global flood. Most of those legends are on Paul Abramson's website, which is creationism.org. You can read all the legends for yourself. This is what they taught. There was a global flood. I think we also have the obvious evidence in front of us from looking at all the strata that we see. There are layers. Let's see, BV 88. There are certainly layers to the ground, and these layers, we do a demonstration here at our Dinosaur Adventureland in Lenox, Alabama, where we create stratification very rapidly with just shaking up a jar with sand, gravel, mud, dirt, water in it. It automatically always stratifies in the same order. So I think we look at all over the world, you see what's called polystrata fossils. I'll show you some here. Petrified trees that are standing up, running through all of the layers. You guys claim these layers are different ages. Where I got some here. I got about 25,000 slides. Sorry about that. It might take me a minute. Never mind. Okay. Polystrata fossils. You can just type in creationism.org. There's some of them on that website. But what was the original question again? I got two thoughts going through my mind same time. One got lost, rather.
No problem. What is the best, or I guess a couple of the...
global flood. Yeah, okay. Best evidence. Well, certainly the Bible says there was one. Certainly there's thousands of legends of a global flood. Thirdly, we have stratification all over the world that is not from volcanoes. There's a layer of gravel. I live in Lenox, Alabama. We purchased a gravel pit that they mine gravel out of for 50 years. There are 7 layers of gravel right where we are that go all the way to North Carolina, North Tennessee, and South Florida with thousands of gravel pits digging out of these same 7 layers. And they're rounded rocks. The rocks are rounded off. They call them river rocks. No, these were all tumbled during the flood with the tide going up and down. Come take the tour of Dinosaur Adventureland. I gave a bunch of tours today. That's one of the things we stop and show the kids, how rapidly this happens. The evidence for a flood would be we're standing on top of it. The rocks, the gravel, the sedimentation, the continental shelf. If there was a global flood, watch my video number 6. I cover that for 2 hours, the evidence of a flood. It'd be a lot quicker than in a debate here. But certainly, Jesus believed in Noah, and Jesus believed in the flood. And I happen to know him personally, and I believe he's right. I think anybody else is lying. Go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Hovind. And Derrick, of course, if you'd like to respond to that question, go ahead.
Sure. The reason why there's a ton of local flood stories is because human societies need fresh water. We can't drink salt water. So people, when they formed in the past, especially, did not form along oceans. They didn't form up in the mountains. Well, they could form in the mountains to get glacial ice, or snow. In high elevations, it has more fresh water that accumulates on mountaintops. So you do have some societies. Those societies don't have local flood stories. They don't. And if the flood story was true, then they would also have those stories. Those societies that formed in mountainous areas in high elevation, which gave them access to fresh water, they don't have those flood stories. And if you actually look at the local legends of these, the people who had to be around rivers and lakes, and lakes are of course fed by rivers, and sometimes during different seasons they will flood locally, which explains why they will have a flood story. If you ask them when did their flood story take place, they all come at different times. So it's no consistent story saying that all these floods happen at the same time as described in the Bible. That's just not true. One other thing as it relates to, because we actually spoke about Dr. Hovind mentioned the petrified trees. Petrified trees are dead. So yes, a dead tree, if it has been petrified, can stick out and layers can form around it. That's no problem. And one other thing, sedimentary rock is just pulverized igneous rock. And of course, it can be, again, compacted again, and like sandstone and stuff like that. But what they tend to have is radioactive elements in the atmosphere gets trapped in those layers. When it gets compacted, that's what scientists test to try to determine the age of that sedimentary rock. And that's how we can tell that geological strata do exist. So,
okay, well, thank you for that response, Derrick. And of course, Dr. Hovind, since it's your question, you get the final words on that one.
Well, he made a statement that mountain civilizations don't have flood stories. He didn't back that up with anything other than his word that this is true. I would check out creationism.org, where all the flood legends, 330 of them are listed. It wouldn't matter. That's not my proof for a local flood. I happen to believe, for a global flood, happen to believe there was a global flood. The Bible clearly teaches there was. Certainly, they'd have to, you guys who believe in evolution would have to explain the existence of literally billions, with a B, billions of fossils in the ground. Animals died today by the millions. None, or zero, are going to fossilize. We get deer hit on the highway all the time here in southern Alabama. None are going to fossilize, absolutely none. But fully articulated skeletons are found fossilized. There's the Karoo Formation in South Africa is estimated to have 800 million vertebrate animals fossilized in one location. Where's this happening? We don't see any fossils forming today at all. None. We see billions of fossils in the ground. How are you going to interpret that? Fossils, they're fully articulated. I mean, they didn't get scavenged all over the woods. They're still connected. The bones are all connected. So if you wish to believe there wasn't a flood, you can believe that if you want. I think, Derrick, you need to read 2 Peter chapter 3 and put your name in the margin right there in the Bible. 2 Peter chapter 3 says, in the last days there would come scoffers who would be willingly ignorant of the creation and the flood and the coming judgment of God. Three things. They don't understand. They don't believe in the creation. They don't believe in the flood. And they don't believe there's going to be a judgment one day. And I haven't asked you, but I bet you'd say, yep, you don't believe that either. So you'll be surprised on that one. Anyway, so I challenge you to prove your statement that mountain civilizations don't have flood legends. How would you know that? I think they do. And if they don't, what would that matter? I think it's off point. So we're on too many. We're supposed to get some audience questions here, brother, before we run out of time. Go ahead, whatever you want. Moderate.
Okay, here we go. Yeah, that question alone could probably be an entire debate. So good responses from the both of you. Since we are going on about an hour and a half now, what I'll do is I'm going to pick out of these 100 questions. We could probably do this for 30 hours, but I'll pick out one specific one that pertains to the debate topic, and then we'll make that the last question, give you guys some final words, and call it a night because an hour and a half has flown by. So question from SFB Mob. Question is for Derrick. What would be your best example for speciation?
Best example for speciation? Oh, that's easy. What they're called ring species. If you go and we actually have an example of a newt. I believe it was a newt, but there's many ring species. A famous example is one in Mexico, around the base of a mountain. Here you have this species that diversified, and you have these newts all around the mountain. But you have many species that can interbreed, but once you go around the ring, that one species cannot interbreed with the next one. So one can interbreed with one, that can breed with the next one, that can breed with the next one, that can breed with the next one, and all the way back and all around. But once it goes around the mountain, the end product can no longer breed with the original stock. And we have tons of examples, and these are called ring species. So you can just look that up. You could just push that in Google search. You're going to see a ton of examples of ring species. So that's my best example of speciation. But of course, we look at transitional species. We know that dinosaurs, for example, are closely related to birds. We know that they've shared many things in common with reptiles and many things in common with modern day birds as they exist today. We know that feathers are modified scales. So we have a ton of examples of speciation, and the process of speciation is pretty clear.
Awesome. Thank you for that response to that good question from the audience, SFB Mob, on speciation. Dr. Hovind, if you'd like to respond, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Right.
Okay.
On the opposite sides of, are we muted? No? Okay. On the opposite sides of Grand Canyon, we have two different squirrels, the Abert squirrel and the Kaibab squirrel, considered a ring species. That's an example. They're both still squirrel. We've got stuffed ones right up above my head here, up in our science center. Come on down, visit. We got a huge taxidermy collection here of maybe, 8 or 10 different varieties of squirrels. Okay. They're still a squirrel. And the ring species, after they get around the mountain, and the two that went around can no longer interbreed, they're still the same kind of animal. Somebody might decide to call it a new species, but I think every 4-year-old would say that's a squirrel and that's a squirrel. It is not proof that mosquitoes and whales are related and they all came from a rock, which came from a dot of nothing. So you're dreaming to believe that ring species is evidence for evolution. The best example of speciation that you gave, I would avoid the word speciation. That's a man-made term. Who's deciding what's a species? I think the Bible's very clear they will bring forth after their kind. And it's pretty obvious that a Kaibab squirrel and an Abert squirrel are the same kind of animal called a squirrel. I don't think there are any examples of any animals producing something that anybody with one eye and half a brain and no money involved would call a new kind of animal. There just aren't any. You can believe whatever you want, and you certainly couldn't use fossils to prove anything. If you find a fossil in the dirt, all you really know is it died. You couldn't prove that fossil had any children. You couldn't prove it had children that lived. And you couldn't prove it had children that lived that were different. And no animal today is able to do this. No living animal can produce offspring other than its kind. Dogs produce dogs, cats produce cats, no exceptions. So if Derrick wishes to believe that dogs and cats are related long ago and far away in SpongeBob imagination land, you can believe whatever you want, I don't care. But that's not science. So I'm sorry, there are no examples of evolution, which is the debate tonight. You may find some examples where somebody has decided to call it a new species, but come on, it's the same kind of animal. Is a Kaibab, a squirrel, and an Abert squirrel a new species? I think actually they are, but they're still a squirrel. Go ahead.
Okay, a quick response to that. That's why I pointed to dinosaurs and birds, and I showed that they were similar. Also, if we just look at, especially when considering the flood story, so that ties in nicely to the previous question too. If we look at Australia, we see that the mammalian species that exist out there are marsupial. Now, the flood story will have to explain why, if that's true, you got two of every animal. Why did all the marsupials end up in Australia, save for the opossum, right? So that's the only marsupial that's in anywhere outside of Australia, essentially. But in the case of Australia, we know that they had all the species there because all the native ones are, mammals are essentially marsupials. We know that it had a common ancestor, that it evolved to occupy different ecological niches. That's why you had the Tasmanian wolf that looked like a wolf for all intents and purposes, but had a pouch. That's why we have the kangaroo. That's why we have the wombat and everything else like that. All of these species came from a primordial marsupial that split to occupy various niches. It is the only thing that makes sense. This is called Sarawak's law in evolution. So there's a law around this and explains why those things that are in close proximity to each other and radiates out share common, not only genetics, but common, a common origin. So that's another example of speciation taking place. Explain how all the marsupials ended up in Australia, especially if all those animals were on Noah's Ark.
So thanks for the response, Derrick. I guess since you kind of responded to the previous question on the flood, would you like to give Dr. Hovind a response?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And then we'll add it to final thoughts. Dr. Hovind, if you'd like to respond to that, just to keep it fair.
Well, sure. He's got about 4 points hanging on the table here. Which one? The idea that birds are related to dinosaurs, I think, is ludicrous. And certainly dinosaurs did not turn into birds.
Not that had rings.
What advantage is there for a T-Rex to turn into a chicken? I mean, I ate chicken today. He wasn't more better adapted than a T-Rex. I never eaten a T-Rex, but okay. As far as Australia having the marsupials, most of them, we have possums here in Alabama. They're marsupial, but I think you need to watch my video number 7 where I give a 10-minute answer to that. Don't have time for that now. After the flood, animals would migrate away. At the same time, ice caps are melting back. At the same time, ocean levels are rising. At the same time, the crust of the earth is broken up into plates, which are shifting and tilting, and the water's running off. So they just happen to be trapped there and protected. Most of the marsupials couldn't handle competition with other creatures if they were in. I mean, there is survival wars going on all the time. You know, the wolf trying to catch the deer. We got it right here on our property, coyotes anyway, going after the deer. So I think what we see is squirrels produce squirrels and whales produce whales, and there are no exceptions. The idea that they're related, T-Rex and sparrow and hummingbird are related, is only taking place in the mind of the evolutionist. It's a wild imagination idea. I think extremely dumb, but that's a different story. I certainly don't think you have the right to teach that to kids, that's part of science. It's not science that scales turned into feathers. Feathers are incredibly complicated. It's not science to say that they did that. It's a religious belief. You believe they did. Okay, great. Nobody's ever seen it happen. A lot of animals have scales today. Let's see one of them make a feather out of it. The fact that they're both made from keratin, so is your fingernail, so is hair. It's a common design element. A lot of things are made out of iron too, because people say, wow, that's a handy metal to make stuff out of. Let's make something out of iron. It's not proof for evolution. I think it's sad. It's sad that people believe that, but that's okay. It's sadder that they teach it to other people and we all got to pay for it. That probably is criminal rather than sad. But go ahead.
Right quick, because I know that was Dr. Hovind's response, so I just want to say right quick, we know dinosaurs that had feathers and beaks, and we know chickens that live today have feathers and they have scales on their legs. So yes, to say that feathers about a 5 scale is not is not a leap. Yeah.
Okay, gentlemen. Well, I want to say it's a really good debate. If you guys think it's a fair place to close it down here, I know we could probably discuss these incredibly important topics all night, but we're now going at 1 hour and 34 minutes. I really appreciate you both giving us your time for tonight. I want to say thank you for keeping it respectful, cordial, equally timed, very easy debate to moderate, and also a lot of fun. The chat had a great time. We had a lot of people in the chat. Also, thanks to the audience for a lot of great questions. And I apologize if we couldn't get to all of them, but I think we got to some really important ones. So why don't we proceed, if it's okay with the debaters, to some final thoughts from both of you, and then we'll kind of close it down for the night. Since we started with you, Derrick, if you want, you can give us some final thoughts. And before you do, I want to thank you again for doing this.
Oh yeah, thank you, Dr. Hovind. I definitely appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to chop it up with me. I definitely appreciate it, and I respect you a lot, sir. Let me say to the people that's out there, listen, I'm not trying to push atheism or anything like that. I wouldn't even call myself that in the classroom, and it's not necessary that you start believing in God to accept evolution. What I'm saying is that The reason why you should accept evolution is because the evidence is there, is clear. It does not necessarily conflict. You can believe that God played a hand in causing evolutionary change. I'm fine with that. I don't accept that personally, but it's not required that you not accept that to accept evolution. And there are something at stake here. We are in competition with other nations, and we need more people going into the sciences and learning things about science. The reason why we can make medication is because we operate off of what we know through evolutionary biology and chemistry to make medications that is life-saving and life-extending. And once again, we are in stiff competition with other nations in the world. We want as many intelligent individuals coming up, accepting science, not questioning science or being skeptical of it, not being skeptical of climate change and so on and so forth. Once you start questioning the experts, the people who are actually in the labs, who are actually in the field, who are actually producing technologies that we all benefit from, once you start questioning the underlying presumptions, then that does not encourage you to go into the field. And that means we are all weaker as a nation. We are falling behind nations that are in the East. We're falling behind people who are in Western Europe. We don't want to do that. We want to continue to be an economic powerhouse. We want to continue to be to be the beneficiaries of technological progress and change. And it requires that we accept evolution without rose-colored lenses on. Now, this does not mean you have to jettison your God belief. It does not mean you have to throw your Bible out. It does mean you can look at the stories literally. You can still find wisdom in the Bible. I still find human wisdom in the Bible. I love a number of passages. I grew up as a Catholic. I love a number of passages, but to take it literally is not justified with the evidence that we have.
Well, thank you for those final words there, Derrick. I want to thank you again for the debate, and over to you, Ken Hovind, for some final words as well.
Well, thank you for having us. This was a wonderful time. I'll do this anytime. Appreciate you guys putting the Standing for Truth channel together. Derrick, if everybody in the world believed in evolution, if everybody believed it, that really life is a struggle for existence and only the strongest survive, and it's really best if the weakest die off and eliminate the poor genes, would the world be a better place? You seem to think it would be if everybody believed that the strongest have the right to eliminate the weakest. That's exactly what Adolf Hitler thought. He was a strong evolutionist and put it into practice. He said, man, we got to find the superior race, which is the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Germans or Norwegians, and we need to eliminate the inferiors. I don't understand how a black man like such as yourself could believe in evolution when you study the history of what happened to people who, like Adolf Hitler, who tried to eliminate, look what happened to Jesse Owens, the black man, the American that won the most Olympic medals in 1936 in Berlin, Germany. How he was ostracized just because of his skin color, because of Hitler's belief in evolution. I'm shocked that you would believe that, but that's okay. So I'd like to ask you a simple question. I've never had an atheist answer this or an evolutionist answer the question. If evolution is true, how do you tell right from wrong on any topic? Is abortion right or wrong? Is murder right or wrong? Is sex with your dog right or wrong? Is anything right or wrong? And before you tell me what's right or wrong, I'd like to know how you're making this decision. If evolution is true, the strongest and the biggest and the baddest survive. They make the rules. How can there be a moral standard for right and wrong? Would it be wrong for you to murder your baby if he's screaming in the middle of the night and you want to go to sleep so you can kill the baby? What's wrong with that? Does society just, if evolution is true, you have no standard for determining. And you keep using the word accepting science and accepting evolution. You start using the word you believe in evolution, and you believe evolution is part of science when it's not. We've never seen any animal produce anything other than its kind. It's a belief that you have, which is great. You can have your belief. But if the nation, the sky is falling technique you just used, if we don't believe in evolution and teach evolution, we're going to fall behind economically and America will cease to be a powerhouse. That's ludicrous. It was the creationists that built this nation. And you can't find one scientific advancement because of this theory of evolution. Not one. It's a completely useless theory. Even if it's true, it's useless. It's done no good whatsoever for the advancement of anything in science. Check our website, drdino.com. If you want to talk to me personally, I take calls all day long, 855-BIG-DINO. extension 3. Be glad to talk with you. Thank you so much.
Okay, awesome. Well, this was an awesome debate, to be honest with you. One of my favorites. We had a great chat. You both were awesome. Kept it fun. So why don't we shut it down for the night? Oh, yeah, of course, Derrick. Yeah.
Yeah, just right quick. To answer the question, you said you didn't have any atheists who can answer the question as it relates to morality, how to determine if something is right or wrong. I recommend you check out the debate I had with Smokey Saint. So that's posted. It's up on YouTube. We just had that debate maybe a week or two ago. So please check that out, and I answered that very extensively. And one other thing, social Darwinism is not, what is taught in evolutionary theory. There is genuine altruism that does emerge from evolution, especially in social species. So no, it's not survival of the fit or dog eat dog or red in tooth and claw. That's not the case. There's actual genuine altruism that takes place and emerges through evolutionary processes. So that's it. I'm good, saying appreciate it.
Hey, no problem, no problem. I mean, I just want to make it fair for you both, gentlemen. So whenever you guys want to, would you both feel like you expressed your points and your thoughts for the debate to shut it down?
Absolutely.
Okay. Awesome. I really enjoyed this. I loved it. And thank you to the audience. We are going to shut it down for the night. So God bless everybody, and thank you.
For all those who appreciate the work that we're doing here on Standing for Truth, please hit that subscribe button.